Hey guys, thanks for listening to today's episode of The Watch. On today's show, Andy and I talked about the season finale of The Outsider on HBO and the first two episodes of Devs on FX on Hulu. And the second half of the episode is my interview with Sarah Barnett, who is the president of AMC Networks and oversees AMC, Sundance TV, BBC America, IFC. And we had a great conversation about streaming wars as well as AMC's slate with shows like Better Call Saul and Dispatches from Elsewhere, and a bunch of other stuff that they have coming up soon. So it was a great conversation with Sarah. If you are interested in what it's like to run a network in this chaotic TV time, you should definitely check it out. Let's get into our show.
I need support staff to clear the room.
Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, it takes an outsider to catch an outsider. It's Andy Greenwald!
Speaking of outsider, are we 6 feet apart?
Oh yeah, that's right. How's your Saudi oil holdings doing?
Apparently not great. I was semi-serious that we should do today's podcast in the style of Jim Cramer's Mad Money. And just go for it. I mean, as you mentioned right before we started recording, we are ad-free today, so we are unaffected. That's right. By the... They can't tell us what to do anymore. They can't. We're no longer bought and sold.
That's right.
By big economy.
Here we are on a Monday. I would say that Outsider and Devs are probably not on the front page of the news this morning, but Andy wouldn't know because he's not looking at the news.
Trying not to. This is a safe space in here.
But we are going to be talking about the finale, the season finale of Outsider and the first two episodes of Devs. Did you watch the second one?
You know I did.
Oh, great. It's a great time to be a TV watcher in America.
You got those late night, for me, texts from the couch the other night.
Yeah. Devs! That's your text.
Yeah, it was like at 9:28.
Which would you like to talk about first? Should we put a bow on Caves R Us?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the end of The Outsider. Last week, I don't know if it actually made it into the pod, but I mistook the first victim of Jack Hoskins' sniper run as Andy. And I was really sad, because Andy and Holly had a great love story.
I really thought those kids were going to make it work.
It turned out I needn't worry.
I mean, I took that pain from you.
Yes.
I was your worry eater because you were like, oh, well, does that mean Andy's going to survive? And I was like, my friend, check his knuckles. The tattooed words live forever. There, promise you.
I felt like this episode of Outsider finale was a pretty odd season finale in that it was essentially just a coda to the penultimate episode. In some ways, like, I feel like I put it another way. I felt like 9 and 10 were essentially one long episode.
I think that's fair.
And that there's nothing wrong with that. I found this show to still be like moody and terrifying and exciting and interesting to the very end. I think that this is just how Stephen King stories end. And the 100%. Monster at the end of the dream is it is El Cuco, and he will kind of talk to you when you finally meet him.
The thing that
in a lovely southern accent.
The thing that's haunting you, by way of Dublin, thanks to Paddy Considine.
Yeah, I know.
The thing about stories like this, as a longtime aficionado of horror fiction and horror films, I mean, that's how I'm known.
Yeah.
The scare guy.
Yeah.
Mr. Shutter.com.
Fangoria Greenwald.
Mm-hmm.
Fangy Greenwald.
The thing that's haunting you and the being haunted and the mystery and the question is always going to be more evocative and entertaining than the reveal. That's just part of it, right? I mean, again, longtime scarehead here, is that what we're called? It's the moment before the jump scare that's addictive, that's delicious, that's exciting, that keeps you coming back for the adrenaline, and then it's revealed to be Freddy Krueger, I assume, or a monster or something else. Again, don't really dabble in this stuff, so I'm out on a plank.
Out on news, out on horror.
But in on giving you my takes. So I have to say, and maybe, I mean, we're joking about being out on the news, but obviously this is a kind of a stressy time in the world. And maybe because of that, I can't tell, I was totally fine with this finale, is what I wanted to say. And I wonder if that was partly because I was slightly removed from it. Maybe if I had been more invested, I would have found more nits to pick with it. But I honestly felt like this show has told us what it was going to be over the last few weeks. There wasn't a world where the truly psychologically unsettling feeling of those first few episodes was going to suddenly come crashing back when it was quite clearly headed for a shootout with the devil.
Yeah,
that's where we were going, and
I think I was a little surprised by Open Sesame being by her being like "damn you to hell," and that just kind of stops Jack in his tracks. Not that I wanted them to come up with some sort of action set piece to stop him,
right?
But the rules of engagement were just unclear in this thing, which is like totally fine. I completely agree with you. I really, really liked the show a lot. I loved the beginning, and I thought the idea of taking a kind of Hitchcockian, paranoid criminal justice story and turning it into a supernatural horror story with a Holmes and Watson who are equally credulous and incredulous about what's happening. And mixing in with that, like stories about grief and just this kind of almost, frankly, viral contagion of becoming a murderer. But I just felt like the end was like, well, it just felt a little bit like, so you guys went into a cave, chatted a bit, and then Claude showed up,
walked out. Well, I mean, look, I think you have to look at it structurally. And I think there are a couple things at play here. One is we've spent a lot of time talking about, should this have been 6 episodes? Should it have been 8 episodes? There were many weeks when we thought it was.
Yes.
before figuring it out.
I think at 6, you're like, this is almost over, right?
I thought so.
Yeah. But then we wouldn't have gotten the cave.
Similar. Well, we're gonna finish with that. Similarly, we talked about how much nicer this was and more enjoyable that it wasn't a movie, because it would have been just a race to the finish line. And we got so much more character, and frankly, more characters. So, if you appreciate that, I think there's a give and take here, because I'm grateful for the extra time we got with Glory and with Ralph's wife, whose name I am unfortunately forgetting, perhaps because she got very little screen time in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But so we got time with them, and they got time to build. Mare Winningham and Julian Nicholson, who are brilliant actors, got time to create characters and, establish a rapport with each other and with the rest of the world. It was pretty clear once they drove off to Tennessee that those stories were not going to get short shrift. Those stories were essentially done. So it's a trade-off. Did you want none of them at all? Or did you enjoy the time spent with them but feel cheated because of the lack of payoff?
Sure.
Similarly, I think that Richard Price, because of his long experience with this, looked at the shape of this and kind of, this is what TV is, right? Did the best he could. Gave space to the things that interested
you think
him.
about that scene between Mendelsohn and Winningham at the end, where they're just sitting, look at their son's grave.
But not their son. They were sitting at Frankie Peterson's grave.
No, I think they were sitting at their kid's grave, but in the same cemetery Frankie Peterson's tombstone is.
It's like the kids' table.
For cemeteries.
For cemeteries. Yes. I get it. Okay.
Yes. And that is just a way above average rendition of that scene that we have seen in other horror or crime films.
So let's think about it just purely in terms of breaking the season, the decisions that were made here. And one of the decisions was to put the adrenaline and action set piece that felt like a finale at the very, very top of the actual last episode.
Sure.
It was, by the time it was over, then the title card appeared. That whole sequence was really well directed by Andrew Bernstein. It was really hard to watch. And then in terms of the adrenaline and the various feelings that it engendered in the audience, those feelings were done, basically, for the hour. One of the reasons why was, I think, that Price and the other people involved in the show wanted to try and restore some of the emotional gravity back to the show in the end. That to do so, that meant finishing the story, the quote-unquote story, relatively quickly and trying to earn back those moments that I appreciated at the end, like with Mendelsohn and Mare Winningham. I actually even preferred the scene of her burning the chair.
Sure.
Which I thought was beautiful visual and told you a lot in a way that was more in keeping with the sort of light and shadows of the first 2 episodes. So it was an intentional decision to do that, and one that I appreciated and think was probably the best solution.
So the idea at the end there, when they're wrapping it up and they're essentially choosing to conceal what happened, is that were they to try to go forward with El Cuco doubling viral contagion of murderous impulses, etc., that they wouldn't be able to clear Terry's name because it would be so unbelievable and so fantastical.
Well, I think they just wanted to bury it all
Mhm.
forever. And they wanted to come up with a story to clear Terry and Claude.
Sure. Sure.
Both of them who were, in evidence or had already been accused and
right.
arrested, et cetera, et cetera. So that was their goal. I think that came first. Lower on their priority chain was paying due respect to the fallen hero among them, Attorney Howie, who got done dirty by the universe, by Jack,
Just a guy who wanted to smoke weed and eat chicken.
and
man.
frankly by the show, and rescue a guy he'd known for 20 hours.
Andy, what are you doing? Like, I couldn't believe that. I was like, Howie, come on. First of all, I was sort of like, why is Howie the chauffeur? This is
Also,
clearly like a high-powered lawyer.
I feel like, I respect the sacrifice
Mhm.
and I respect the heroism, but I also feel as, I don't want to stereotype anyone, but as the Howie of most groups, I feel like I know my place. You know what I mean? Like,
I buy, you fly.
I'm there to offer, I'm there to offer counsel.
Yeah.
I sometimes I'm a good hang, occasionally.
I think you're a good hang.
I have my moments. I don't think in a firefight,
Uh-huh.
would you expect me to cape up?
You're a lot of things.
Thanks. I keep you guessing.
You're not what I would call a foxhole guy.
I don't even think that's an insult.
And that's okay. I don't even know if I'm a foxhole guy. Haven't had to find out.
But one thing about you, Chris, I feel like you would be ready to find out. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like in a foxhole, if we were seeking cover behind some,
I probably have some real Andy impulses. I think that I would be like,
Andy on the show.
Yeah, not Greenwald. I think I would be like, I can get to that car.
1,000,000%
Yes.
you would. This is your behavior socially at times. This is your behavior in casinos, sporting events. I'll wait in that line.
Yeah.
You will learn.
Driving down the turnpike, there's no traffic.
Yeah,
Right.
that is a classic.
Yeah.
You are willing. This is a foxhole guy to me, is someone who is willing to learn something new, potentially fatal about himself in the moment.
Mhm.
Not over years and years of, self-introspection and therapy.
Which is what you think Howie does.
Well, Howie lives his life out loud. You know what I mean? You can tell by his automobile.
Yeah.
You can tell by his saucy demeanor with people in authority. So I guess that he and I aren't as similar as I would have thought. One way in which we are similar, and I realize I think I've only said this on social media and not on our podcast, is that I do either owe Bill Camp an apology or
Oh, yeah.
it's a compliment. Turns out, brilliant Australian character actor Bill Camp from Massachusetts. But I do think in today's day and age, calling an actor Australian is one of the better compliments you can give them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because I don't know if anyone else here listened to Ben Mendelsohn on Fresh Air recently.
I did not. I missed it.
But on The Outsider, Ben Mendelsohn as Ralph is just a brilliant case study in in charisma and weight, and in normalcy. And he's just this bedrock. And on Fresh Air, he does sound like a pitchman for Outback Steakhouse.
Are you serious?
He is.
Is he talking about blooming onions?
Basically.
Yeah. That
He
was
is
not Australian at all.
I was goading you into it, but that's foxhole behavior
Yeah,
right there.
right.
You're
It's
like, at this moment, I'm talking into a microphone.
Ben Mendelsohn's Australian accent was the SUV 10 feet away.
Yeah. And you could get there. You thought you could get
I
there.
thought I could get there.
You're like 100,000 people are going to hear this one way or another, but I can make it there. And, live and learn. But anyway.
What did you think of the fact, what did you think of the soft edges of the ending in terms of like
I wanna
Holly,
talk about that.
who has just seen her beloved Andy both shot to death and lit on fire, is like, you live and learn. She's just kind of like rolling with the punches.
Yeah, I think there are a couple things here. I mean, this is...
Holly, who I don't think, all due respect, is a high-volume dater.
You don't think?
I just don't think she's speed dating.
You don't think she swipes right a lot?
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that could be season 2 of The Outsiders, Holly's dating life. But I got the impression was limited in her social interactions. So she finds this guy who gets her on like a subatomic level and is just number one boy, and he is assassinated.
Yeah.
By a steaming drunk drooling demon.
Well, person inhabited by a demon.
Sure.
Which, to your other point,
Also, one thing I won't do is
Yeah.
take a snake bite for you.
Really?
Yeah, def not.
Well, here's the thing, though. I do think that
I'm
if
scared
you
of snakes, and I that did not improve my viewpoint of them.
a snake
last night.
situation like that,
Uh-huh.
which is ongoing, where he sees it, he continues his business,
Well,
he
it was a
sees it again.
metaphor. I got it.
Well, I wasn't trying to reach that point. I was just like, I don't think you would extend the interaction with the snake,
Mm-mm.
is what I'm saying. Like, that would be it. You see the snake,
Yeah.
you would go. So it's different than a foxhole situation. You wouldn't draw it out. About
Holly.
the comment you made before about Holly yelling at Jack, I think a lot of the conversation about this episode for me is coming from a structural place where it's like, I'm trying to see, and I think I do see a lot of the moving pieces behind the scenes, and you end up in these moments where it's either going to work or it's not, but you need to try it. And so, for example, Holly talking Jack down, so to speak, or talking him into suicide by snake, which is only a preface to actual suicide. The groundwork for that was laid in the Holly Jack episode 6, right? Where she she interested him because she could see him and she seemed to have empathy for him. So in that moment, so you do those scenes to build to a moment where she faces him down through the scope of his rifle.
Yeah, and Holly and
he sees
Tamika
her.
are the two people who seem to like view Jack as a full person, which is
Yes.
probably what gives him pause about ruining their lives.
And it didn't matter what she said, I think, in the sketching out of the episode.
Oh,
What
okay.
mattered was
she confronts him.
she looked at him
Mhm.
and caused him to break free from El Cuco for a moment.
I like that read. I think we can.
But I agree that it didn't quite work because the line felt so.
Well, it wasn't even damn you to hell as much as at the end, it felt like they were more like the real journey were the El Cucos we met along the way, rather than
That's how I feel about this podcast.
rather than
Yeah.
like, well, that was fucking traumatizing. you
Well,
know?
I agree with that. And I
how
think
about
that's also the problem of structure where I think, we've been talking fast and loose with what is King and what isn't King. We haven't read the book, so
No.
we don't actually know. But in my limited experience reading King books, the gnarly parts that you get to, like the shootout, kind of carry the day.
Mhm.
And there isn't, and it often, at least in the books that I read, an attempt to sort of walk it back and say, but emotionally, what was this about?
Sure,
He
but I
does
would
the
say
work
in
at the
King
beginning.
books, I would say, and in King adaptations, it's the build up to that's
Yep.
great. Then they get there, and he almost has a hard time conceiving of what would be a good showdown between ultimate evil and this
Yes.
brand of good.
Well, that's why the first 1,000 pages of The Stand are the best.
Yeah, and then so let's talk briefly.
But to your point, I think, again, that was the structure of the show where it built along that track as one thing that we really loved to another thing that we really enjoyed. And then at the end, you were just going to end up with this kind of hash of, well, now we want to walk it back and be the other thing, but we've overcommitted and we don't have a lot of time left to resolve Holly's behavior and resolve Holly's trauma, or even, I was joking, but truthfully, pay attention to what happened to Howie or Alec, because we have to get, we don't have 20 more minutes for, what's Yul Vasquez's character's name? My God, I'm
I can look
blanking on it. But anyway, for the survivors, let's just say, to deal with what's in front of them other than, the sort of overhead shot of them reacting to the carnage, because what we need to do is get back and resolve the Terry Maitland case, and we need to resolve Ralph's family situation and his marriage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Sablo,
of course, classic Zablo.
yeah.
So there's two other things probably to discuss. I mean, the big one is the, as you put it, the soft endings, right? And so coming out of that, I think the soft, and I hope people saw that there was a post-credit scene. You saw that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
It's the one where Alec is shot.
Do you want to describe the post-credit scenes in case our listeners didn't see it?
Sure. Well, after the credits, we joined Holly in a bathroom, I guess, on her journey. I guess she had stopped at Andy's funeral, wherever that was being
She loves
held.
to drive.
She does love to drive. She's a driver. And she has a scary vision of Jack haunting her, which causes her to check her own neck for boils. And then she goes online, and I was really pleased to see another current TV show have the same dependence on old media as mine. The thriving local newspaper
Yeah.
with a headline clearing Terry Maitland's name. And while she's looking at this, she barely, I don't think even notices that she has a pretty pronounced scratch on her arm.
Right.
Okay, so I have the other thing that I think people were bumping on, and it's probably related to that scratch that people saw at the end, was the moment in the cave when Holly says, "Who's Terry?"
Yes.
And I totally bumped on that.
I did too.
Didn't get that as well. Without naming names, I was in contact with someone who was involved with the show, asked the question directly, and was told that the Who's Terry is not meant to suggest that
Holly's had some sort of memory loss.
Mental break, or that she's cuckoo-ish or cuckoo-adjacent.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of the cover-up that they're going to be doing.
Yes. That's what I thought. It was kind of like, this conversation never happened.
Exactly.
What conversation?
That's exactly what it is intended to do. I would argue that it was wildly confusing and it made things harder. But
I think anytime you're in proximity to El Cuco,
you should watch what you say.
Social distancing is a must.
That's really true.
I would just personally just be like one giant oven mitt.
Yeah.
You know? And two, I think that
I would like to ask Dr. Tony Fauci if the N95 masks are efficient in proximity of an ancient, unexplainable evil.
Yes. And two, I would just be as clear as possible in your communication.
Yes. Second note on that scene, had no idea why Ralph saw
the two kids.
Dead bodies.
Yeah.
Didn't know who the kids were. Had to check, and I have confirmation, but what did you think?
Well, at first I thought it was the two kids who originally went down into the cave.
So did I. It was not.
But they were dressed way more Supreme Drop 2018.
Well, they had some time.
Yeah, that's true. So you think as two ghosts in a cave in Tennessee, they could go get some nice streetwear?
I think the world is connected, as we're learning at our peril.
That's true. So just on Flight Club?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was Ralph's dead son.
And Frankie Peterson, right?
Frankie Peterson's brother, who he shot. The one who shot Terry Maitland in episode 2.
Yes.
Okay, was my response to that. Had no idea what was going on and why he was seeing ghosts.
So read on that.
Yeah.
Was that like Ralph was fully like a medium now?
Well,
and
again,
now that he
yes.
believes this thing, he now knows he can see dead people.
And I kind of thought that was a bummer.
Sure.
Because he's already said he believes. And I feel like that's enough. And I thought that
yeah, he doesn't have to be Whoopi Goldberg. Exactly.
And at the end, when he's talking with his wife, and he's like, I saw our son, but it wasn't really him. And she's like, but it doesn't matter if it was really him. What did he say? We were brought back to that world of the figurative, which is where the show was mostly when we were loving it the most. The literal, I sort of bumped again. So that happened, but I guess, so that's what the ghosts were warning him, that Cuco was still alive somewhere in there. So interesting, by the way, also that Ralph had to wait for the face to become like female and then an old lady to smash it. Why didn't he just smash it? Was he just like, where's this thing end? Where's this going to go? Was he hoping it would turn into like other was he celebrities? Was he looking for impressions?
Right.
Okay. So then we get to the final scratch thing.
McMahon.
Like, what? I can't smash him. I love Star Search. I think it was a fake out, and I think it was a bummer because I think the conversation, not just from us, but even a little bit from HBO and the sense people have about what the show is, has made it pretty clear that this was not a series finale. Should HBO renew it, and I hope they do, there's more story to tell here, probably with Holly's character. I feel like there is a better way to tease that there's more story to tell than tease that you have the same story to tell again.
Well, they teased that part before the cutscene.
Yes.
Where they were just like, if something like this comes up again, call me.
Call me.
Basically. And Holly leaving and just kind of having this understanding and not now obviously knowing what to look for.
But does it have to be? I mean, this is the name of the show is The Outsider, but also that the line "Outsiders, game recognizes game" basically suggested that there's a show here with Holly Gibney as like spiritual investigator.
Yeah,
it doesn't always have to be.
It's X-Files.
For the supernatural. I love that.
It doesn't always have to be El Cuco and
Exactly.
doubling. It could be some other phenomenon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, that ending was actually so old-fashioned TV in a great way, the actual ending. But I was on board, and then you have to have that second
That's what
thing.
made this show good, is the fact that it had so much old-fashioned TV in it. And I kind of want to get into Dev soon, and it ties together in that Outsider told us very early on. I don't remember where the guy in the hooded sweatshirt first shows up, if it's 1 or 2. I think in 1 he shows up.
I
and
know
then obviously in 2.
Outside of the
outside of the courthouse.
When Terry shot, yeah.
So the major twist of this show essentially happens in the first 2 episodes. And then it becomes a detective show, a supernatural detective show. But we talked about this in the middle, those middle batch of Holly episodes. We were way ahead of the characters in terms of our understanding of this world. Now, they would increasingly give these things names and sort of pathologize its behaviors. But we got the idea that there is some sort of evil spirit capable of cloning people to commit crimes and then seeping, basically
Drinking
eating
up
all the grief that comes out of those crimes. And that's what makes it strong. And ultimately...
So in the way that they feed on collective grief, they are similar to Philadelphia sports talk radio anchors.
That's right. But ultimately...
Yeah.
There was not a lot of what's the outsider about? What's the main thing? What's going on here? When are we going to find out that this is in fact this?
Right.
It was pretty straightforward. It was this actually, it is the person's worst nightmare. It's what if you're accused of a crime you didn't commit?
Yeah.
And then it's actually, in fact, the devil did that. And then they go and pursue this evil and bury it in a cave. That's pretty as straightforward as you can get with this kind of thing. And I think it's interesting to get started with a show like Devs, which is honestly magic. That show is absolutely magical in terms of the way it looks and the way it sounds and the way it's written. But is essentially the engine of that show is what is Devs. What is going on here? And I will be fascinated to see how Garland plays with that, because I don't find him to be a slick storyteller.
No.
He usually tells you what's going on and he investigates what that means. In Annihilation, that's not his story, but he confronts what
Annihilation is pretty much his story, I would say.
Yes, but he confronts what Annihilation is about relatively early on. He confronts what Ex Machina is about. There's not a lot of sleight of hand going on. So I don't know. I think a lot of TV is powered by that. A lot of TV is powered by Mystery Box and by keeping you on the hook until the very end. I feel like you're not really on the hook with Outsider. I feel like you were I'm watching this show because I really like the performances and the writing and I want to see where it ends up, but I'm not confused about what's going to happen.
No, I'm entertained and I'm entertained and I'm entertained and grateful. I'm entertained by the story and I'm grateful for the high-class production and cast and everything that went into it. And that is not a bad formula. I hope they make more of these because I really enjoyed them. My only question coming out of the finale, I wanted to ask you before we move on to Devs. Why didn't El Cuco in his Elliot Alderson hoodie incarnation,
Mr. Cuco?
If children are so delicious, why did he just go visit Terry's kids a couple times?
I don't know.
Chat with them.
I don't know.
Is it if you're on a diet and you
it can feed on their fear?
Walk by the candy store?
Because it feeds on their fear and feeds on their grief?
I don't know. Or was he already full? Because he had just been really, really dining out.
Yeah.
Right before that?
Yeah.
I guess I had some questions about that. But to your point in terms of a transition, I think it's interesting. Outsider and Devs are both highly ambitious, beautifully done, totally humorless, hour-long shows, one of which is more meat and potatoes. And so I enjoyed it. And one is more...
gastronomy.
Yeah, seriously.
It's that, who's the guy who did all the foams? Wiley Dufresne?
It could be Wiley Dufresne.
Yeah.
It could be, yeah, exactly. Highest gastronomy.
Every time I talk about food now, I'm worried Dave Chang's going to tweet, "fuck you" at me.
I think you should be afraid of that all the time. Because for what it's worth, and I didn't prep you for this, so we don't need to talk about it, but yeah, Outsider, yeah, Devs, but the first episode of Ugly Delicious was the best thing I've seen on TV maybe this year.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. And I'm not just saying that because we're all on the same network and I'm just desperate to get back on that podcast because I want to join a winning team. We can talk about that on Thursday if you want. I highly recommend everybody watch it. Okay, Devs. So, I love Devs.
First 2 came out. Alex Garland, written and directed, starring Sonoya Mizuno, Nick Offerman, Allison Pill. Some really great performances from guys that are usually just you're really happy to see him. Background players like Stephen McKinley Henderson and Zach Grenier, and it takes place.
What about Mr. High Fidelity himself, Carl Glausman?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and then it takes place in I'd say slightly altered near future.
Doesn't seem that future. I mean, it seems pretty much like now.
Yeah,
Just
it seems like there have maybe been some advances in computing.
One or two.
Yeah, and then the first 2 episodes kind of go along these 2 separate tracks. There is the Kubrickian mystery, mystical, quasi-religious thing that's happening inside that compound, inside that kind of bunker that they've built for devs.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the mystery of what happened to
Sergey?
Sergey, yeah.
I mean, want me to tell you what happened to Sergey?
Sure.
I watched it.
Yeah.
Nothing good.
Did you see the cutscene, though?
Wasn't great.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say about the show, and again, a great first showcase for FX on Hulu, because this feels like a magical, special jewel box of a show. It is not for everyone. And I think that for people like John Landgraf and Nick Grad and Eric Schreier, who have really good taste and have a good track record, the ability to invest in things like this and have a correct platform for it must feel amazing, honestly. Also grateful that it meant we got 2 episodes at once, because I am not someone who is impatient about TV anymore, and I was very happy to be able to watch 2 of these.
Yeah, absolutely.
2, the first thing I want to say about it is I think the show is fucking beautiful. Like, staggeringly beautiful. And not beautiful in an unfamiliar way, because Alex Garland has a style, and it's kind of transporting in a haunting way.
Yes.
He's a filmmaker whose aesthetic matches his interests so seamlessly. And what I mean by that is so much of his work, especially recently, is about artificial intelligence or technology.
Some things you care a lot about.
Passionate. And I've said that a lot on this show. So luckily there are no old tweets or podcasts to dig up to drag me. But what I mean is there's this almost seamlessness to the user interface of his shows. It looks beautiful, almost to the point of abstraction or uncanny valley-ness.
That's, I think, why I think I'm like, is this in the near future? Yeah.
Yes, but in the same way that feeling of, well, everything is so smooth, but there's something disturbing in that smoothness of the features of whether it's the way the people look or whether it's the way the buildings or the nature looks. I mean, that is his subject. That is his project as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's about things that are too beautiful to be believed or hiding dark secrets. So I love the synergy between the way it looks and the way it is.
I also want to mention really early on, it sounds amazing too.
Oh my God.
And that Jeff Barrow, who's obviously like probably best known for his work in Portishead, I don't know what the replacement level score is for this show, but I'll just say I'm watching something right now that it's not germane about what it is, but I am watching it. And it's pretty good. It's like, I would say it's like a very good show.
Okay.
Really hamstrung by a very average score.
It makes a huge difference.
And a very like kind of like you think it's like a pretty good thing. You think it's a pretty good show, and then kind of like cop music comes on.
It can take you right out of it.
And it does. It does. It kind of makes me feel like I all of a sudden like I snap back to like I am watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean it's worth mentioning that the Barrow thing is a huge deal.
And I just think that just to focus on one specific image, the giant statue of who we find out is Amaya, that gave the name of Nick Offerman's company, is such a haunting, unsettling, powerful image. And I just think often with TV and the way we talk about it and the way we consume it, we blow past stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's it about? When's the next episode available? How's it doing? All these conversations. That is an image of stunning clarity, totally unique. And I think about it. I find it unsettling. Every time it appears, it's so odd. The way that Garland and his director of photography and his production designer staged it, it feels physically uncomfortable, the size of it,
Yes.
and the surreality of it.
But you think about like how it teases out our awareness and I don't know. Wouldn't want to say sublimation to, but like think about how much you even know something like the Twitter bird.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And imagine that times X10 or X100.
Mhm.
What if they just like put a giant bird up? You know, I mean, that wouldn't be that crazy.
No, I mean, Apple built that spaceship headquarters, and we're like, oh, visionary.
Yeah.
They could do what they want,
Yeah.
and we're all going to be like, how fascinating, because
Right.
clearly they're ahead of us, and that's the same thing. So I just want to take a moment, like a show that is showing you something like that, a series that is showing you something like that, is laying down a marker about the type of thing that it wants to be, and I think it demands respect, if not fandom. I mean, this show might go off the rails, but it is worthy,
Mhm.
of our attention in a way that I just found so exciting, frankly. And then you take it the step further, and it's just all these decisions that he makes about how to portray something that is, if not the future, futuristic. And it's communicated in ways that are so much more tactile and relevant and believable than a bunch of elders in cloaks not using contractions, a la like Matrix Revolutions or something. It's Nick Offerman, famous for playing a woodwork, for being a man who builds canoes out of trees.
Sure.
As a tech visionary, with his hair like that and his clothes like that, shoveling microgreens into his mouth. and driving a Subaru Outback. Like these are the little decisions that make you believe and make you understand and make you feel something. And this weekend I was listening to something I was on NPR, and there was an interview with William Gibson, who's a famous writer and, sort of seer, basically,
Johnny
people say at this point.
Mnemonic,
because he invented the word cyberspace in 1979.
Yeah.
And they were asking him about, like, how do you predict the future? And he's like, the way not to do it is to sit and think about the future. The way to do it is to look at the present.
Right.
And try to look clearly and cleanly at what actually is going on, at people's behavior now, because that's telling you, even if it's hidden or even if it's sublimated, that's telling you about how people want to behave. And this was in relationship to him seeing a video arcade in 1979 in Vancouver and seeing the way people playing, I guess at that point, like Galaga or Asteroids, were physically moving their bodies in concert with the avatar, the 3-pixel avatar. And that told him people want to be in the game.
Yeah.
And Devs feels like that to me, even when I don't quite even know what it's about yet. That it feels like that kind of, it's telling us something about our behavior now in a way that makes it feel even more disturbing.
So there's that conversation between Kenton and Forrest at Forrest's house.
Right. Forrest is Nick Offerman's character. Kenton is the security guy.
Yeah. And I think so far, in terms of if you want to know about what is happening at Devs, to me at least, the key conversation happens there where Kenton essentially, I'm paraphrasing, says something like, why don't you get a new car or something like that? And
you have more money than God, yeah.
Yeah, do something about, you do something where you care about the environment.
Get an electric car at least.
Yeah, and Forrest says, but I don't care about the environment. And to me, those guys both have the sort of haunted look of people who know what's coming in some regard. And, there's been a lot of online speculation about what's going on inside that cube and what Devs is and what is the world of Devs.
They're tuning in Etch-a-Sketch images of Christ on the cross.
Yeah. Do you have any theories, or do you care?
Yeah, well, it seems to be about picking up the residual energy waves of the past, which exist within us, and then also being able to predict the future because of it.
Yes.
And all of this is tied to, or at least suggested by, Forrest, Nick Offerman's character, and Alison Pill's character's like just very aggressive determinism. Like, as he says to Sergei, you didn't do anything. You don't have free will.
Yeah.
You were already on a path.
Right.
So I forgive you. And then he has him killed. What I love about this is, as people know, no longer a news junkie. So unsubscribe to everything. However,
except for the Chris Ryan headline machine when he walks in the
dangerous. But, back in my multiple tabs open days, days I'd like to call every day prior to Sunday.
Yes.
I knew that this is the sort of tech utopian Randian outlook that is truly terrifying in the world.
Yeah, where they kind of like shrug off morality because they're like, it's written in the stars. That
It's
this
written in the
happened.
code.
Yeah, exactly. Same
we
thing.
Can't.
They look like stars in the show, though.
There is no exactly. There is no morality inherent in a piece of code or into an idea
mathematics,
or
yeah.
to mathematics.
Yeah, right.
Morality is what we put on it. And so that scene when Pill and Offerman are sort of weeping, or he is anyway, in those beautiful gold Faraday cage, whatever things they are, he's expressing, I wish I could mute this chain of code running in me that makes me feel emotions here.
Yeah.
But I can't. So, I mean, this is about our world. I mean, this is where we are right now.
Yes.
There are a number of high-profile websites that I think muted morality quite a long time ago. Not The Ringer.
Yeah.
Big fan of The Ringer.
No, I know.
So, I don't know. I find it interesting. I think that a common criticism, I mean, like we said at the beginning, the show's not for everybody. But
it's not a laugh a minute.
It's not a laugh at all.
Yeah.
But
it hasn't been a laugh in the 80 minutes that we've seen.
So far.
Yeah.
Well, the salad eating was pretty good.
Yeah.
But beyond that, that fact that this is reflecting something that shakes me to my core and exists in the world, it doesn't feel. I guess what I'm trying to express is, yes, I started off this conversation by praising the objective aesthetic beauty of the show, but it does not feel like an exercise in just showing off things that are beautiful.
No, and I think it actually
deeply connected.
It feels like those two shows that I talked about, that central mystery about what happened to Sergei, or rather Lily's pursuit, because we already kind of know.
We know.
And the mystery of what is happening in Devs, I think is the perfect kind of, not metaphor, but it's the perfect kind of like allegory for like the two kinds of TV that often get made now.
Mm-hmm.
These highly cinematic kinds of television and highly writerly kinds of television. And obviously the best TV comes when those two things perfectly merge. And we see things where it's like, oh yeah, obviously this filmmaker really just got to work some stuff out over the course of a couple of hours. But it's really, you have to have the good writing, and you have to have good writing that's not just like, I don't want to unfairly compare Devs to Westworld, but it's not just, this kind of like, we're just going to keep moving the can down the road so you guys don't know totally what's going on. That's essentially what Westworld is to me, whereas this is like, no, we can see it, and now we have to grapple with it.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, even if there are things here that I am generally allergic to, the way the episodes begin with like characters staring portentously off into the middle distance while those droning tones play and whatever. Look, it doesn't really matter if that's something that I generally like or not.
Right.
This is a aesthetic and narrative choice that Garland has made, and he's wrote and directed the whole thing. So it was the choice that was made, and that was in the work that was presented.
Yeah,
so
I don't even know if we're even doing justice to like how overwhelming this is, like on a filmmaking level.
I'm so into it for that reason. The only wild card for me, and I'm curious to see how it develops, is Lily, who is nominally the main character here, but is, as you just correctly pointed out, slightly hamstrung from a narrative perspective because we are way ahead of her. So it's tricky to. So far, it isn't. This is concern trolling on a story level.
No, but she starts out the show where we are like, I'm watching a show about this like seemingly sinister. You going into it that Amaya is not like a super cool place to work,
right?
Even though they're like probably like it's a super cool place.
I bet
to work.
they've got foosball tables.
Yeah, right. And so we're waiting for Lily to arrive at that, and then we're waiting for her to do something about it.
Right. I think I'm interested in seeing how the character develops and how the performance develops, because charitably, like, this is an actor who, like, I have loved in very physical roles, right? Garland has used her a bunch in Ex Machina, where she's dancing, and Annihilation, where she's kind of dancing at the end.
Yeah.
She is a dancer. She's a trained ballerina. And her, I don't want to say an affect, it's just her performance style is technical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
It's not like, which is a choice also for Garland and how he wants to tell the story. I think, and I'll be interested to see how that is utilized and how it develops, because I think an easier version of this story, like if it's The Net or something, is you cast, which it's fully not, but that was a great movie.
You cast like a full outsider to look at.
You cast a full outsider audience surrogate who also is overflowing with humanity and emotion to be like, oh, I'm all in on her horrible situation. But, the show
But I
takes
kind of
great
like the
pains to
fact that
suggest
they don't have a character who's like, I was just dating a guy who was working at Devs and now he's dead.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about computers. Like, I like that she has some fluency with what's happening.
Yes, and, this was also important groundwork laid by Garland, is that she has behaved in quote-unquote cold ways as well, as we all have in our lives. But, in her relationship
Right, she leaves
with
Jamie, yeah.
Jamie, she was just like, nope,
Yeah.
time for an upgrade.
Right.
And which is probably how he felt when he grew that beard.
Okay, so we'll keep talking about Devs on Mondays. They air on Thursday nights. The second half of today's pod, as I mentioned in the beginning, is going to be an interview with the head of AMC, Sarah Barnett, who came by for a chat. It was really interesting talking about Saul and dispatches from elsewhere, but essentially also talking about navigating the streaming wars as the head of a network. So it was a really fascinating conversation. So you can listen to that next, and we'll be back on Thursday. We have Briar Patch Thursdays. You can also listen. You can also watch Briar Patch tonight.
Yeah, can I just say, episode 105 airs tonight, 11 p.m. in our sweet, sweet, sweet spot after wrestling. Spot I'm so grateful for. This is a fun one, written by the fantastic Haley Harris, who I realized we already taped our Briar Patch Thursday segment, and I neglected to mention her then. Haley worked on The Leftovers for 3 seasons with Damon and brought such a passion for procedurals to this room, which I love. And this is kind of our procedural episode. It's more of a detective-y driven show where we really learn more about Packingtown and about what Felicity may or may not have been doing. And Allegra's on the case, maybe to her own detriment. And beloved character actor Peter Stormare is there in a floor tracksuit. This is a fun one. I'm excited to share with people. And watch it at 11 tonight if you can, or stream it. And we will be back on Thursday to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my interview with Sarah Barnett.
I'm going to listen to this one, Baranskis. This is a good one.
I am so happy to be joined by Sarah Barnett, who is the president of AMC Entertainment Networks Group and AMC Studio, and she oversees AMC, BBC, America, IFC, and Sundance TV, as well as the company's production arm, AMC Studios. And before taking over AMC Networks, Sarah was the general manager of BBC America. And prior to that, she was the head of Sundance TV, where she brought such watch favorites as Carlos and Rectify and Honorable Woman and Top of the Lake to our screens. And I'm so excited to have her on the watch. Sarah, thanks for coming on.
So excited to be here.
That's a really big remit. That's a really big network. That's a lot of stuff to be in charge of. And it's a really tempestuous time in the television industry. But my first question is pretty pedestrian. I think our listeners would be really curious what like an average day or an average week in your work week looks like. Because as TV changes, I imagine the sort of day-to-day, hour-to-hour stuff you do in your job changes a lot.
Yeah. I think I'm not a very sort of, I'm not someone who runs at routine with open arms. So part of what I love about this job and part of what I've always loved about my jobs is you never really know what any day is going to be. I mean, the one consistent thing is meetings. Sure.
Yeah.
I have days and weeks and years full of meetings. But the meetings range from really everything, from small to big, from strategic to tactical. I go between New York and LA quite a lot. So the corporate center for AMC Networks is in New York. I'm based there with the marketing, PR, strategy, digital, sales teams. But then the programming, production, BA piece of my job is all in LA. So I'm here every couple of weeks. So a fair amount of travel. I think that the fascinating, turbulent shifts that we're all part of, more than ever, are a sort of synergistic thread to decision-making. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate out the sort of strategy business underpinnings of the roles from the day-to-day decisions around specific things. So building a great team who can really have that
both
sort of
sides of the brain thing
in their mind is really necessary. But equally figuring out how to not make everything an examination of macro, micro, and how to create some guardrails around, okay, this is the bit we can impact today or tomorrow or this month, and give teams something of a clear direction, albeit one that we all have to understand is fluid and open to change. I mean, for me, that kind of going from the big to the small and back again is something that is always really, really interesting. It's actually what you guys do on this podcast.
Well, we talk so much about, I think that in the years since we started doing this podcast about in 2012, I think, back then it was more of a conversation show about last night's episode of Homeland and last night's episode of Downton or last night's episode of Breaking Bad. And it's since evolved into a conversation about how we watch TV. because that's the thing that everybody has in common rather than any of these sort of central water cooler shows. It's, well, we all are grappling with how many streaming services should I subscribe to? What is on my DVR? How many hours of the week do I have to watch TV? And I imagine you are faced with a lot of those same questions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the how people are watching TV, the how our audiences are shifting in their behaviors, the how we continue to be a curation platform at AMC Networks or a bunch of platforms at a time when scripted shows have gone from, 200 in 2012 to 500 and something. And with the launch of Peacock and HBO Max, we'll jump.
Yeah,
We
right.
certainly haven't hit the top. So how we do what we do within that context is increasingly part of the conversation. But I think those are the really invigorating, interesting conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in a certain sense, in our world generally, we're kind of all concluding, I think, if we're concluding anything, that conventional wisdom really isn't the way forward. I mean, you look at politics,
yes.
There's no way
yeah.
to say that the ways in which, there's no way to really believe that there's a predictability around how things are going to play out or around, mainstream media kind of reporting and the kinds of ways that sort of media reflected and shaped a conversation. It's changing so quickly.
Yeah.
So I think within entertainment, it's the same thing. We really don't know where we're going. We really don't know where we're going in terms of where the business side is headed, how the different ways that different delivery mechanisms of television to consumers will impact the consumption of content.
Sure.
And so I think we're all sort of feeling our way through, and there's something that is really about, I think, having the stomach for that
Mm-hmm.
and enjoying that and staying. And I feel like I'm sort of saying the same thing, but I guess it's the thing that I profoundly believe is the only way through and is the exciting way through, which is to keep kind of embracing the big while interrogating the small and
right.
understanding the dynamic between those things and shifting. And that's kind of fascinating, particularly when you have a really cool team and a really rich, deep, interesting set of brands and a company that has, for sure, some of the limitations of size, the size of AMC Networks, but equally some of the nimbleness and some of the opportunity of not having to serve huge audiences,
sure.
but being able to really know who our audiences are, what they like about us, how they move between our different platforms, and therefore how we can connect with them and continue to give them shows that they like in a form that they can digest.
We often talk about ourselves as viewers and I think our imagined listener as a TV viewer. And I think that person is probably in a very high percentile in terms of how much television they're watching and how much they know about television at any given point. But I read it in an interview you did with the LA Times. You talked a little bit about some of the studies that you had conducted about AMC viewers. And without getting into too many state secrets, I was very curious about like some of the findings that you had there, because I think that one thing that happens, I lived in New York for a while, now I live in LA, and I know a lot of people who think a lot about television or make television now, is that the blinders kind of come down a little bit in terms of like, well, why does somebody watch what they watch and when do they watch it? And I was curious if you could tell me a little bit about some of the research that you've done about behaviors, TV watching behaviors.
Yeah, we do a number of different studies. Some of the most interesting ones are actually with cultural anthropologists about some of the deep need states that are met through watching television, which is really interesting. And I've spoken about that a little bit in the past in relation to natural history programming, which is having something of a moment in the last couple of years.
For sure, yeah.
And I think is particularly resonant for particular cultural reasons at the moment. But I think that the study you're probably talking about is the segmentation study, which is a sort of huge, almost year-long study that delves into the most useful segments that watch whatever network you're researching. So we did it very recently with AMC. That I think probably the most interesting way I can talk about the use of a segmentation study was the one that I did at BBC America when I first went there. And when myself and my head of programming, Nena Rodriguez, arrived at BBC America, we looked at everything that had ever aired on the network and everything that had worked. And really what stood out head and shoulders above anything else was sci-fi. It was Doctor Who and it was Orphan Black. Mm-hmm. And there were many, many character-led 2, 3-parters, 6-parters, amazing British BBC or Channel 4 or whatever, character kind of pieces that had got great press at times, had won awards, but hadn't really penetrated in terms of big audience, other than Broadchurch. That one sort of did really well.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, sci-fi is the thing that BBC America viewers loved. And then we did this big segmentation study, and we actually asked people not just what, do you like sci-fi or do you like crime or whatever, but we sort of asked, why do you love these shows? And we realized, for instance, that the reasons people loved Orphan Black was not because it was sci-fi, although that didn't hurt. It was because it was really fresh. It was a story about many different rich themes with women at the heart of it. It was a smart play on representation of women. It had deep themes about control of your body, but it also had big swings in the storytelling and a kind of really sort of particular pace to it. And I think that if we hadn't done that study, we probably wouldn't have realized that Killing Eve was a show that could have worked on BBC America, because we would have thought, well, that's not sci-fi.
Right.
So, that isn't a great way to spend our money. So I think in understanding the key reasons why certain things have been popular is really important, so that you don't misdiagnose and you don't sort of become a programming group out there in the community saying, our network needs are, X, Y, Z, or Z. So we did that recently with AMC, and it's early to quite know how we're going to be translating that, but I think it's really exciting, and I think it's sort of got a way, maybe broken open a little bit of an idea that things need to be genre or not genre. And actually, we're sort of agnostic about that, and really what we're starting to think about is, so long as there's a sort of distinctive voice and a dynamic concept in what we do, and we sort of break that down into lots of different attributes, but, that we can... we believe that that's what our audience really likes, and that allows us to be pretty then open to sort of having that in the back of our heads and then being sort of alert to that great, fantastic idea that may come along.
Right.
So I think, the worst thing to do is to have a checklist mentality, I think, about a creative business.
Of course, yeah.
It just doesn't work.
You spoke at TCAs this year, and you talked a little bit about the fact that you're able to develop voices because you don't have huge pipes to fill. And obviously that's what we're seeing now are these library plays where people are developing tons and tons of shows to get them on their services to say, hey, look at all the hours we have for you to just spend, never leave, stay at home, watch this all day. But I was wondering if you could describe, for lack of a better term, the pipes that you have to fill. Because I think for often we're talking about a Netflix or we're talking about an Amazon or a Hulu, but you still have this linear cable business that you're servicing, and you still have and then it goes all the way down to these smaller streaming services that are under your umbrella, like Shudder. Can you talk a little bit about what those pipes are for us?
Yeah, so I don't oversee the smaller streaming services. But we are increasingly at our company looking at the different audiences we have across AMC, BBC America, IFC, Sundance, AMC Premiere. So all the platforms that I oversee. And then Acorn, Shudder, Sundance Now, and UMC. And I think what's interesting about the sort of ecosystem of that within AMC Networks is the brands are different. The brands are rich. The brands are not brands that are based on scale. That isn't necessarily baked into the value proposition of those brands. It's really much more curatorship. But we do understand, and increasingly understand, through some quite genius internal business intelligence people who build proprietary tools, how and where our audience is similar and how and where it's different across all of our different platforms. So that allows us to invest in content and really put it in front of different audiences in ways that aren't blind. We're not sort of dumping it on different platforms. We're really understanding how to promote from one platform to another and where the different where the different segments of our audience are. So we're not cannibalizing, we're not duplicating. We are wrapping our arms around our entire ecosystem and using data to be pretty surgical and pretty forensic about our content investment and how we connect our great shows to the biggest possible audience within our company in a way that is kind of the opposite of having to go big and broad to get everybody. There's actually sort of quite specific content for specific audiences that we understand within our ecosystem. So to me, there are pros and cons to being one of the few independent programmers left in the entertainment television landscape today. The big pros are, I don't have the biggest budget in town. Equally, I don't have to drive the biggest global audience with the choices I make. We can make choices that are very writer-based, that are very specific to our audience, and be smart in understanding how to move them around within our current reality. And as the world inevitably continues to evolve and new kinds of bundles develop that AMC networks can play in and grow in, we believe there will be the business underpinnings to allow us to continue to create content, premium scripted content, even as the revenues from the linear business model inevitably get impacted by the headwinds there. But we can continue to play in a promiscuous number of outlet, of spaces. Does that make sense?
It does.
So our strategy won't be building a big walled garden and staying within that. Our strategy will be to take our brands that are rich and meaningful and move them around into lots of different spaces, lots of existing and new different kinds of business models that drive enough new revenue to hopefully continue to make the kinds of shows that we're made for. And I actually believe quite passionately that the context of how you watch things is so critical, and to have the pressure of producing shows that continue to sit in the sort of top tier, it sounds so snobby, but, you know, a really premium space, and have a truly curatorial brand, and have to be part of a huge streaming conglomerate, and the kinds of imperatives that go along with that in terms of audience and scale, and indeed in terms of data informing the decisions you make.
Yeah.
You know, I really believe that there's something very cool about staying independent, albeit a requirement to dance very, very, very nimbly and deftly.
Yes.
And I think
sort of like they shoot horses, don't they?
Indeed,
Yeah, right.
totally. And I think it's a really smart piece that Sonia Soraya wrote in Vanity Fair not so long ago about, and it was so good because it sort of put into words something I've been sort of fumbling in my head to try to fully articulate, which is sort of about how I think that when people watch content in big vessels where volume is so overwhelming, your mode of consumption, the ways in which you're watching for different reasons. Your watching becomes much more shallow and much less immersive, much more as a distraction from boredom. If you find something that distracts you from being bored, that's the win when you're surfing through a big vessel. And I think that's a very, very, very different, back to the cultural anthropology piece of what content really delivers to us in a deep human way. I think that's a very different experience than watching on a weekly rollout with anticipation on a platform that doesn't have a ton of stuff, just has really good stuff. So that's the thing that I'm really intrigued, and the team is really intrigued by, and that's the team that's the mission, I think, that drives us and propels us, you know, and then finding the right stuff and you know, continuing to be competitive and stay competitive is a whole rich conversation.
Sure. I mean, Andy and I have been talking a bunch in the last couple of episodes about Saul, and one of the things that's been so amazing about that has been both, it starts out, I think, everybody has to wrap their mind around it being this continuation or a prequel to this story that everybody has a lot of thoughts about and everybody has a very personal attachment to. And it's a much different show. And then over the years, it evolves a lot to where it is now. And it's so interesting how nothing with where Saul is now could have happened differently. Like, you can see the amount of people who have caught up on it through binge watching it on streaming services. You can see the amount of people of it who are coming to it and saying, oh, now I recognize like the enormity of the accomplishment here. And now the key word I think you said just then was anticipation, because I think people were really, really excited about this show coming back, having a sense of how many more episodes there are left. And you don't really get that experience that much anymore when most television viewing experiences are more like driving down a highway very fast and there's just a lot of billboards. And some billboards stand out more than others. But Saul's feels like more like I have pulled off onto a side road and stopped at a diner somewhere and I'm going to stay a while. And that must be very special for you to be a part of that when that kind of works on all these different levels, right?
Yeah. I take zero credit for Better Call Saul, and I continue to be completely gobsmacked that I have any proximity to a show like that and creators like Vince and Peter, who, who are masters of the tease like nobody else, master of the long game. So the sort of form of the show plays so beautifully into a weekly release and an anticipation between seasons that might be more than a year occasionally. And I think that...
Not that we're counting.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
I think that show is sublime and has long since escaped the shadow of being compared to Breaking Bad, as genius as that iconic show was, and I think now stands just shoulder to shoulder with it. I mean, it's an extraordinary feat, and I think it's so interesting as well, those shows that kind of straddle the former era of television. It felt like when The Americans ended that it was sort of the end of a show that started in a different era of how we watched. Yeah. And I think Saul similarly, so having defined now the ending, which is next year for Better Call Saul. Sure. I think it's sort of and the fact that show has a particular connection to, obviously, Breaking Bad. So the final season will be leading up to Breaking Bad. I mean, I'm not giving anything away. I have no insight into what the final season will be. I
honestly don't even want to know.
No,
I honestly, it's actually been...
You trust those guys so much, right?
And I kind of almost want to squeeze out every bit of it before it goes.
Yeah.
But one of the
Can I just say before we move on to
sure.
Saul, just because she freaking deserves it, Ray Seahorn.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she's just the most incredible performer. I can't take my eyes off her.
Oh,
she's that ponytail. Everything about her. She's everything. Every single thing. I mean, Ray is one of the most hardworking, sort of, I don't know, sort of genius discoveries in the past several years of television, I think. She's really amazing. And although she gets talked about, she needs to be talked about more.
That third episode was absolutely, just put that in acting schools. But you said Discovery. And I know that one of the things that you do is you're looking for the next Vince Gilligan and the next Peter Gould. And we're kind of in this era right now where you look at something like, say, Outsider, which is a show that we've been talking about a lot, where it's Richard Price and Ben Mendelsohn and Jason Bateman, and Jason Bateman's directing it. It's based on a Stephen King novel.
Julianne Nicholson, who's amazing.
It's Julianne Nicholson, who's incredible. And it's got this, and Cynthia Erivo, and obviously that's a certain kind of level of established talent. Right. Now you're looking for Richard Price 25 years ago. Richard Price before he writes Sea of Love, who's written a couple of crime novels or whatever. How do you do that in such a competitive marketplace? Because one thing I've noticed, obviously, is that someone will go from making a relatively small indie film that plays at Sundance or plays at South by, and they're making a DC Comics movie the next year. So obviously, the development track is much shorter now. So where do you slide in to find somebody who might be the next Phoebe Waller-Bridge or might be the next Vince Gilligan?
It's a really, really good question. I mean, the stones are overturned increasingly. But it's still, there's still opportunity. There really is. I mean, I think we talk about this a lot. We were talking yesterday. The amount of first-time creators that AMC has put forward on their shows is, I would suggest, second to none in terms of curator brands in television and premium scripted. And we continue to do that. So even someone like Jason Segel, who clearly isn't an unknown voice or an unknown creator, to give him a platform for his passion project to play out was the kind of thing we want to do alongside someone like Vince Gilligan, who had been working, in writers' rooms for very, very many years, perfecting whatever that incredible craft talent he has. But he hadn't run a show before. Matt Weiner hadn't run a show before. Ray McKinnon hadn't run a show before, So for us, and many of the things that we're doing moving forward, similarly, a show called Soulmates that just wrapped recently, shooting in overseas, and British writers. One of the guys is a writer from Black Mirror, Will Bridges, and the other guy, Brett Goldstein, who's a sort of actor-comedian. It's a really original concept. That's their first show they're running. Equally, Kevin Kneff himself, created by Valerie Armstrong. She was in the writers' room on Lodge 49. Yeah. That's the first show she's ever done, and on and on and on. I mean, it's sort of what we do. And I think that, it is an interesting moment in TV. There's so much amazing content. I mean, there's so much amazing work out there. And we're seeing a lot of big packaged, shiny stuff. And we're seeing a lot of, I think, privileging of director vision over writer vision. And I think we're seeing a lot of shows that come out of a feature feel because of that aren't necessarily shaped for television. So I think there's a lot of really good space for us to occupy as we continue to find those writers who have sort of been bubbling away there and help shape their original visions.
No, I mean, that's absolutely right. There's one thing I've noticed recently is it's not necessarily a qualitative drop-off, but after the second episode where the producing director has left the series, or, just stepped away and when somebody else comes in, it's not necessarily even a distinction between whether or not one person is a better filmmaker than another, but it's so filmmaker reliant that all of a sudden the show feels different in episode 3 than the first 2 episodes. So that idea that TV has always traditionally been a writer's medium, and it ultimately starts with that. When you're seeing scripts come in, is that coming Sundance or BBC America or AMC, somebody from underneath is bringing that to you and saying, hey, here's something we're excited about? Or is it the reverse where you're directing scripts to those places and saying, I think this is right for this brand?
It's very much coming from the team.
Okay.
Yeah. So the team really understands what the needs are for the different networks, the different brands, and is sort of developing accordingly. And sometimes we'll have conversations about, maybe this would sit better there than that, but we sort of pretty much know or have a very good shared sense of what's right for a particular platform and what's right for another platform, and equally how many pieces we're developing for one platform versus another. Obviously, AMC is the biggest.
Sure. When you are, we had a conversation about 2 weeks ago on this pod that was about, we basically listed everything that was on right now that we were interested in, including Dispatches from Elsewhere and Better Call Saul and 10 other things. And then we listed everything that was coming out before March 15th. And I think we got to 15 shows, which for somebody who's a veteran in this industry, when you hear that and when you think about that, like, how do you even go home and watch TV at night? After the day of meetings that you have and watching and reading all the scripts that you have and developing things, do you then go home and fire up, I have to catch up with 3 episodes of this or 2 episodes of that?
I don't. I mean, you have to cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago,
read a book every once in a while.
Or just watch stuff that is real lean back at times. I 3 or 4 years ago, probably, I stopped trying to map everything because I couldn't. And it started to feel, it's the obvious thing. It started to feel kind of like a chore, like a duty.
Yeah.
So, I struggle like everybody else with discovery. There's sort of so much to watch, and yet you're not entirely sure how to find that thing that is exactly right at a particular moment for what you feel like. So, I think that, we're talking just now about the feature writers coming in and the sort of shape of television. And I think that there's a lot that's been so cool with the more formlessness that streamers allow TV. But I also think there's a lot that's been lost. So I find myself often craving shows that are well-shaped. And I think that it is because of the directorial influence. Of course, I'm not minimizing the impact of a great director, but the deprivileging, I guess, of the writer in some ways, and the reliance on stars, on big movie stars, I think, to carry us through things. And look, there's a irrefutable pleasure and joy in that,
Right.
But I think that I crave those shows that are just really well made and that have lots of different layers to them and that are smart and yet also within the form have a lot of sort of pleasure, a lot of just kind of real sort of joy and verve to them. I think one of the things I think we try and do at AMC, it's certainly an intention, is to have some heart in our shows as well, and I think, and they're obviously layered, complex stories. They always strive for that. But at the same time, I think darkness is often mistaken for sort of sophistication sometimes in our stories. So
you can have both. You
can, of course, have both.
Yeah.
Of course,
and Saul's a very funny show, and Dispatches is a very heartfelt show.
Saul is a great example of having both, I think. And something like Killing Eve, I think, strives for both as well, and has both, to be smart and yet also to be deceptively a good time had while watching.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you, my last thing was sort of just more about how fun it is maybe to play with format, because one of the shows that I'm really excited about, you mentioned Kevin Can F Himself, which is this sort of play on, and I'm sort of still hopelessly addicted to sitcoms. Like, I find them very comforting to watch. But can you tell me a little bit about this show? Because I think it's one that our listeners will be really excited about in the future.
It's ingenious. So it's from Valerie Armstrong, who was a writer in Lodge 49. And she said publicly it was motivated by a certain sitcom, which swapped out the character of the wife with absolutely no reference to it whatsoever. And she just was, we've all seen it over the years.
The recast,
but it was a moment where she just felt enough. And she was outraged, and it prompted her in the best way that rage does to do something about it and be creative and write a piece that is informed by the howl of the rage of the sitcom wife. So Kevin can F himself starts out like a regular sitcom, multicam sitcom, and we're going to be very observant of the form of sitcom. So it's interesting from a production point of view, this show. And Kevin is sitting in his chair, and his wife is kind of rolling her eyes and seems to be indulgent. And it's the usual dynamic of the centering of this, this sort of buffoon-like
beleaguered guy,
you're supposed to find lovable, and the wife who's kind of smarter and sassier, but sort of, is in the periphery somewhere. She leaves the room. You pick up, it's a single cam drama. She really hates her husband and wants to kill him.
Yeah.
And then it goes back and forth. So the sitcom piece is informed by what happens in the dramatic piece. And the dramatic piece is, it's grounded, it's moving. It's also kind of somewhat picaresque, but has its own kind of, premium drama qualities. But the two pieces sort of inform each other. And I love it. I love it because it's such a big swing. I love it because it's ingenious. I love it because it's a show whose theme so informs its form.
Yeah.
Just beautifully. It's about the rage of the sitcom wife once she escapes the confines of the sitcom.
And it's a perfect metaphor for this conversation where it's like you're sort of grappling with and raging against and also embracing the conventions of TV. Yeah.
Yes. And centering the woman 2 days after Elizabeth Warren was the last female in the presidential race.
Yes. Well, we can wrap it up there, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me on The Watch. And we're so excited to check out, obviously, the rest of Saul and Dispatches and everything else you have coming up.
Such a pleasure.
Thank
Thanks.
you.